Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Hollis. I am one of the trustees for Sultry Art, and I wanted to thank you for joining us this afternoon for our fall festoon. Just to give some introduction for those who may not be familiar with Sultry Art. Sultry Art is an environmental nonprofit based in New York City that creates rich community spaces that unite arts and ecology in unexpected, educational, and inspiring ways. Today's event, our fall festoon, is a celebration of the honeybee. If you've had a chance to explore our fall festoon event website, you'll see that we've had an afternoon of speakers, of different activities, of art, and this is actually the last of our live discussions for the day. If you missed our two previous live discussions, we had some amazing panel conversations earlier in the afternoon, and I encourage you to go back and take a look at those recordings, which are now available online. And I'm very excited to present our final two speakers for today. A little bit of housekeeping beforehand. So we are doing this live. So if there are any technical issues as we're going through, kind of bear with us and we'll do our best to resolve those quickly. Being live also means that you are able to interact with us. So if you do have questions or comments as the broadcast is happening, please feel free to use the live chat feature, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, to give that feedback and those questions for our speakers. So to kind of jump right into things, not to spend too much time with introductions, want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Tobias Smith. Toby is the founder and director of Bee Aware Brisbane in Australia. He is a native bee researcher and commercial stingless beekeeper with a passion for community engagement in science communication. Since 2010, Toby has been presenting lectures and workshops to community groups on native bees and pollination, from kindergartners to adults, including 12 years of experience teaching university students on topics including ecology, entomology, pollination, and bee identification. Toby's research background is in understanding native bee communities in agricultural landscapes, the use of native bees in crop pollination, and native bee biology and ecology. Toby's current research is focused on stingless bee biology and the use of native bees in glasshouse and protected pollination, as well as in open field crops. Toby's work time is divided among native stingless beekeeping, teaching on beekeeping and bee conservation to school children and adults through Bee Aware Kids, university teaching, and bee and pollination research at the University of Queensland. 5 years ago, Toby's stingless beekeeping hobby morphed into something more serious, and he has been managing native stingless bees commercially since. In the last 5 years, Toby has propagated over 1,000 new stingless beehives and manages hives throughout Eastern Australia. So let's bring Toby on. And hello, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? Thank you very much for having me on in this exciting project. A view from the different side of the world. So thank you for that excellent introduction. I think you've said everything that I've ever done. Thank you. And I think a summary of that is I'm very lucky to have my feet in two different worlds, really. I am in the stingless bee research world and the commercial propagation of hives and sale of hives side of things as well. So for those of you who don't know a great deal about stingless bees, I would like to start by putting them in the context of global bees. So there are over 20,000 different species of bees on the planet. We hear about the most famous, the most charismatic of all of them, the European honeybee. But stingless bees fit in there with about 600 species. And I think we might bring up my first slide, Mike, please. Because these bees, they are highly diverse, the stingless bees, and not just diverse in the number of species, but diverse in their appearances, in their lifestyles, and all sorts of things. So in the middle of this circle of bees here, we've got Apis mellifera as a size scale and a nice, friendly character that everyone knows. And around the side, we've just got a selection of different stingless bee species from around the world. From one of the biggest, that very big one in the outside circle, you can see there, Melipona, to one of the very smallest, the Lura trigona there, which is less than 3 millimeters long. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg of the stingless bee diversity that we find in the world. Now, stingless bees, They are truly stingless. So all female bees on the planet actually have a sting. No male bee on the planet has a sting, but the stingless bees over evolutionary time have actually lost that ability to sting. So if you were to dissect one of these female bees, you'd see a sting, but functionally they are stingless. So that's an advantage that us stingless beekeepers have, is we don't need half as much of equipment as European honey beekeepers do. Now, stingless bees, unfortunately for a lot of people in North America and in Europe and other parts of the world, can't keep these bees because these are a tropical group. We might go to the next slide, please, Mike, and we'll see the distribution of the stingless bees here. So you can see they're a tropical and a subtropical group. They get up into Mexico. For you people in North America, that's the closest you get, and their diversity differs around the world. Now, I'm in Australia. I'm towards the bottom of those blue squares in Australia there, where we have, on a global scale, relatively little stingless bee diversity, but you can see places like the Amazon basin there that has immense diversity of stingless bees. So 600 species, that's our estimate, because new stingless bee species are being discovered by scientists around the world every year. And I think we've got names at the moment for a bit over 500, but others are awaiting naming. In fact, we found a new species this year in Australia, where we have a total of 11 species. Now, stingless bees are a lot like European honeybees because they live in colonies, they have a queen, they have workers, there's this complex social behavior going on. And of course, just like the honeybees, they're making honey. So these are the stingless honeybees. The true name for them are the Meliponini, and we'll come back to that name a little bit later because it's important for the practice of keeping these bees. We might go to the next slide, please, Mike. So stingless bees, a lot like most of the honeybee species around the world, which there's only about 7, they nest inside cavities. So this is a wild nest of some Australian stingless bees. These bees are only about 4 millimeters long, so a lot smaller than European honeybees. They're nesting inside a hollow tree, and they can't nest in landscapes without hollow trees. But these are the guard bees around the entrance, letting their sisters fly home with their pollen and nectar that they've foraged for in the environment, but also fighting off to the death any invaders that try to get in. Now, as we look inside the hive, we'll go to the next slide, please, Mike. They look a bit different to what you might have seen for a European honeybee hive. So erase from your minds hexagons, honeycomb. We don't see that inside a stingless beehive. Now, of course, it varies with 600 species around the world, but what's very typical is we've got 2 separate structures within the hive. European honeybees, the hexagons, they store either their babies, the brood, or their food, honey or pollen. With stingless bees, we've got separate structures for those. And what we're looking at on the screen here are brood cells. So again, these bees here are about 4 or 4.5 millimeters long. So each of those little balls, you can see how small they are. There's a baby bee inside each of those. So those are brood cells. Now, the worker bees, like in honeybees, they're not laying eggs. It's just the single queen who's laying all of the eggs, and the workers are doing all of the work to rear those babies in these brood cells. Now, one of the most exciting differences with stingless bees is the way that they store their honey differently to European honeybees. And we'll go to the next slide, please, Mike. And we'll see here a honey pot. So there's no honeycomb in stingless bees. There are honey pots. Now, this honey pot that you can see with the open top there in the middle with a little worker bee's head poking out of it, this is about the size of a small grape. The workers construct these pots out of a mix of beeswax, so beeswax like European honeybees, but differently to European honeybees, they go and they collect tree resins, tree saps, which they bring home, they mix with the wax, and they construct this. So we call that propolis, this mixture. Now, that propolis has important implications for the honey. So once they fill one of these pots, they build it, they fill it, they cap it. You can see other pots near this one that are capped there. They've got this little nipple looking thing on top. The honey sits in there and it ages, and it infuses both flavor and chemicals from the tree resins that are in those pots. So when you eat a stingless bee honey, you taste the flavor of the nectars and you taste the flavor of the tree resins. Differently to a European honeybee honey, because wax has no flavor. So when you're eating a European honeybee honey, you're just tasting the flavor of the nectars alone. So we get these 2 flavors mixing together, and the chemicals that are in the tree sap also infuse antimicrobial properties into the honey. So you might have heard of Manuka honey, this famous antimicrobial honey that honeybees make down here in the southern part of the world. It's great for killing microbes. Well, stingless bee honey, in the studies that have been done, is even better because of these extra qualities we're getting from the resin as well. Now, we'll go to the next slide, please, Mike. We find them in the wild. They're very exciting all around the world, but also all around the world, we've got this industry, or this series of industries that keep these bees. And meliponiculture is the title we give to this practice, not apiculture. Apiculture refers to keeping apis bees, so Apis mellifera, European honeybees. The meliponine bees, meliponiculture. And our bees are typically smaller, so we keep them in smaller boxes, but it's fairly similar to European honeybees. We've got areas for brood, we've got areas for honey, and we can manage them with simplicity like honeybees, but they're a lot lighter, so we don't need cranes and things like that. And these are just some examples of here in Australia. Here in Australia, our stingless bee industry is actually mostly driven around people wanting them as pets in their garden. As you can see, that nice little hip hive there next to the flower pot, but also the use of them in various crops for commercial pollination. And you can see that on the other side of the picture there. Now, this is fairly similar to some big industries in places like Brazil, in Malaysia, in parts of Central Africa, where they keep stingless bees as well. And if you think about the diversity of stingless bees and the number of hives around the world, we're talking about an industry that is not as big as European honeybees, but is growing every year, and they're a charismatic group with lots of interesting things still to find out. So I think I've reached my time of talking, Mike, so I'm ready to take questions.
Excellent.
If anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, we do have a few questions I would love to kind of chat through with you in our final minutes. In the first is regarding kind of the relationship with humans that have kind of historically lived alongside the stingless bees, and they're wondering if you could speak at all about the cultural connections between stingless bees and some of the indigenous societies in Australia or the Americas, and
Sure.
whether any of those traditional connections are being preserved by the new stingless beekeepers in the new generation that's coming up.
Good question, and the answer is yes and no to that bit. But let's first go back and talk about these peoples and these bees. So here in Australia, for example, people have lived in Australia for estimates of 100,000 years, and of course the bees have been here a lot longer than that. So we have seen over time this continuing relationship with stingless bees in the wild environment. So here in Australia, the way that people, depending on where they are, different peoples would do honey in different ways, but mostly we're talking about wild harvest. So going out, finding places where these bees nest, in some cases following them home. Imagine that, following a 4mm bee back to its home to find its nest, and taking out the products from the hive, opening the hive. So that's honey. That's also that material, that sticky material, propolis, which is used in construction, eating brood, eating pollen, highly proteinaceous resources. So one method in Australia is to take all of that, and you hear stories of landscapes that are so full of bees that has negligible impact. Another way of doing it is going and finding the nest, opening the nest, taking out some of the products, leaving the babies, the brood behind, and then using mud or resin to close that nest in its wild location and go back and visit it year after year. And there are stories of ownership systems of different wild hives. Now, today in Australia, we've also got Indigenous people engaging in the industry of keeping them in boxes. And near where I am, there's a big honey industry. Well, the beginnings of a big honey industry on an island, a native title, traditionally owned island nearby, getting these unique honeys and selling them to casinos and things like that. In the Americas, yes, people have been keeping stingless bees and actively keeping them in something maybe more of the sense that we think of active management of bees, physically putting them into beehive structures. So in Central America, that was hollow logs collected for the purpose. And over there, much bigger stingless bees, size of European honeybees, so a lot more honey. And like in Australia, those practices continue today. But I think everywhere in the world, practices are moving towards boxes. And it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people engaging in these industries everywhere, but we're seeing a shift of practices to boxes. So yeah, it's great history and ongoing.
Excellent. And while we are at the very end of our time, I do have one last question that came through, specifically talking about some of the devastating wildfires that I think we all saw in Australia, and forest fires currently taking place in Brazil, where environmental conservation has become a really significant topic of focus when it comes to habitat destruction and the ongoing impacts of climate change. So the question is how susceptible stingless bee species are to ecological disruptions, and whether you have any thoughts on the most effective tactics for species conservation.
So to put it very briefly, I think it's all about big old trees. So most stingless bees around the world are cavity nesters. They only nest inside cavities, and in most landscapes, cavities are big older trees. Now, when we humans modify landscapes, big old trees tend to be some of the first trees that we lose from our landscapes. If we lose those places, these bees can't nest. Now, fires can do that as well, but humans manage to do that with or without fires all around the world. So that's one of the biggest conservation concerns for stingless bees, loss of big older trees.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Toby.
Thank you for having me.
You're waking up very early on your side of the globe for us. Yeah, it's really amazing information. Like you said, I don't think many of our viewers were necessarily even aware of stingless bees prior to this. So to be able to give them that information and just raise that awareness is absolutely amazing. For folks that do want to learn more, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or on our event channel, take a look at the bio description for Toby, and you'll find links to his website, as well as to a recently published book that I believe categorizes some of the native bees of Australia. So yeah, definitely take a look at all of that to follow Toby and learn more. So thank you again, much appreciated.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
For our final speaker today, I am very excited to introduce Frederick Otera. Frederick is the CEO of the Apiculture Platform of Kenya, which since 2016 has promoted the study of conservation of bees and other pollinators as an approach to improved food and nutritional security and improved livelihoods for socioeconomic development. The Apiculture Platform seeks to develop the science and art of beekeeping in Kenya for food security through pollination, enterprise promotion, and environmental conservation, including building the Kenya apiculture industry, developing best practice and quality standards for the sector, and advancing public policies that promote bee health in apiculture markets. Let me go ahead and bring Frederick on. And let me unmute. And if you could just hit the unmute button for your mic, Frederick. Excellent. There we are.
Yes,
Hello,
yes,
how are you today?
Hello, fine, thank you. How are you?
Very well. And much like Toby was joining us very early in the morning, you are joining us very late in the evening. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And would love to just kind of give you the floor to start to talk a bit about your organization and the work that it's been doing in Kenya.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mike, for welcoming me for this discussion. And I'm very much happy to inform you that I'm called Frederick Odera, just like you have introduced me, CEO of Apiculture Platform of Kenya. And Apiculture Platform of Kenya is a forum whereby we bring all the stakeholders in apiculture sector in Kenya. And at the moment, we are partnering with the national government, who is in charge of livestock. And also we are partnering with the FAO, as well as ICIPE, the AU IBA, among others. So far, what we have done is, at the moment, we are still recruiting members to join us so that we can bring all the stakeholders who can help us discuss the issues that are affecting beekeeping in Kenya. And recently, that is in the year 2018, we celebrated the World Bee Day in Kenya. And this was something that was very good to us, because you see, beekeeping is something that has not been taken seriously in our country. But so far, beekeeping is doing great work in terms of pollination that helps in food production and improved nutrition. Now, the last year, was 2019. We also celebrated the second World Bee Day, which was in Nairobi, and we saw a very good response. And in Africa, I can say that Kenya has been leading in terms of the World Bee Day, so that we can create awareness to people that we need to conserve the pollinators, all the pollinators, including the Melipona, which Dr. Toby has talked about. Because if we don't conserve them, then we will also lose our lives. Now, I just want to talk about the issue on. Let me just about history of beekeeping in Kenya. You know, Kenya is a very unique country, and you find that even in the olden days, people used to look for honey, whereby they were hunting for it in the forest, and you see people are using crude equipment like fire, so that they can chase away the bees, so that they can get the honey. And this one was helping them to get food and also medicine when they were in the forest. And the main people who were living in the forest were called the Ongieks, and they used to hunt for honey and bee broods for food. And you could find also that this could also cause bushfires, which can cause forest fires and burn everything in the ecosystem there. But you find that people have been gathering honey, bee pollen, even the bee brood, but the interest has really grown, and this has really made people to gain skills and knowledge on how to keep the bees. So in the olden days, you find that people used to use the traditional hives, whereby they were using the hollow logs, the baskets, the pots for keeping bees. And you could find that, like, for example, the log hive. I don't know whether I can share the screen.
Let's see. Yeah, let me see if we can. Yeah, down at the bottom, see if you might be able to. There's a share screen button. Yeah, see if that might come up for you.
Okay. We can see some diagrams of the traditional beehives we used to use for beekeeping in Kenya. Are you able to share it?
I think would just need to have you do the initial share, and then once that appears, I'll be able to kind of pass it through.
Because it is telling me that my browser has blocked my screen.
All right. Something I might be able to recommend to our viewers is I think that the Apiculture Platform of Kenya actually has some wonderful pictures and resources on their website, if I'm not mistaken, including some of log hive cultivation. So yeah, so if it doesn't come up,
I think we can just continue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can just continue if you have not received it.
Yeah.
Now you find that people used to have the traditional beehives, whereby, you know, these traditional beehives, they are affordable as compared to modern hives. And these hives also can withstand all weather conditions. And also you find that they do not require a lot of skills and knowledge to handle them. And also they do not require too much attention as compared to the modern hives. But you could also find that we have a lot of disadvantages, because in traditional beehives you cannot acquire good quality honey if you don't use expertise skills. And even manipulating the bees is also something which is challenging. And you find that when a bee hunter or a beekeeper is using the traditional hives, you find that all the broods and also all the combs are removed from the hive, making the bees to take a longer time for them to pack honey as compared to the modern hives, like for example the movable hives. So those are some of the challenges we are having in traditional beehives. And at the moment, some of the challenges in the beekeeping industry is one of them is insufficient skills on personnel in beekeeping sector. We also have unclear policies on implementation of the beekeeping initiative, which the platform APK is pushing for, so that we can have policies that can govern the beekeeping sector, so that whoever is engaged in beekeeping can have a guideline on how to do beekeeping. Because you find that sometimes very many people fear bees. And some people say that bees or the Apis mellifera is a killer bee, but it is not a killer bee. It's only that very many people have not understood on how to handle them. Yes, they are aggressive, but if you handle them well, you will not have any problem. But if you find that we don't have policies to govern the beekeepers, you find that very many people will fear bees. And even if there will be any danger or any animal that has been killed by bees, you will find that these people can take the beekeeper to maybe for to the police. But you find that if we have policies, these policies will help to govern or protect the beekeepers. So another thing is about unpredictable weather condition, which is, I think, is global. So you find that the patterns change, so that even the harvesting season, you find that it also changes. So it requires people to keep on checking on the beehives at all the times. Another challenge we are having is that the expensive beekeeping equipment, they are not affordable. But the good thing is that we train most of the beekeepers or the artisans on how to manufacture or how to fabricate this equipment, so that they can access them in affordable prices. The bee phobia is there. And now, how to mitigate this? The Apiculture Platform of Kenya is creating awareness through very many platforms, whereby we work with our stakeholders, even through schools, even through churches, so that we tell people that bees are not enemies. Bees are our friends. If we embrace them and know how to handle them, then we will not have any problem. Another challenge is about uncoordinated markets, because you find that very many people or very many beekeepers, they sell their honey maybe locally or alone. But you find that in our platform, we are trying to bring them together, so that we have economies of scale, because we know that we have a very high demand for honey, but you cannot find it because the market, the selling and buying is not coordinated well, so that even the buyers can get them in at one point. Lastly, last but not least, is that we have opportunities. We have favorable conditions in terms of bee forage to support production of bee products. The new technologies that are coming in, these are good opportunities for us, so that we can embrace these technologies and produce a lot for the available market. we have the goodwill from the government, and also we have willing donors who are willing to support or fund the beekeeping project in Kenya. The market is there, and also all the stakeholders are willing to support us, and therefore we find that beekeeping is something that if we promote, all of us, and also create awareness to the public, I think people will embrace this, because we are told that if bees get finished now, we will take about 4 years for all of us to disappear also in the world. So we need to protect the bees, and we shall also be communicating through our website, which we are currently updating, so that we can also share more information with the public, and also all our stakeholders and those people who are interested in taking beekeeping as a project or as an enterprise, and also for environmental conservation. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Frederick. That was just an amazing wealth of information about beekeeping in Kenya, in both its history and its current form, and some of the strategies and goals going forward. I know that we're also kind of running close to the end of our time, but I do have a question that has come in for you regarding the environmental stewardship side of beekeeping in Kenya. Your organization mentions that, for instance, if farmers' livelihoods rely on the preservation of something like forest flowers, they're incentivized to preserve the forest rather than practice something like a slash and burn agriculture approach. So we're curious whether or what some of Kenya's current ecological challenges are that you think a stronger beekeeping sector could help to address.
In fact, the challenges is like, for example, encroachment of forested areas by the people who are living with the next to the forest, or the natural forested areas. Now, what we are trying to do is that we are partnering with the forestry institution, or those who are engaged in conserving the forest, so that they can partner with the local community, who can also put their beehives there. So as they put their beehives next to the forest or inside the forest, they will be able to conserve the forest, as well as gaining from the forest in terms of honey production, and also other bee products. So you find that when the forestry institution partner with the local communities, you find that people will be embracing the conservation of the forested areas within the country. At the moment, we do not have a major challenge, but we are trying to create awareness so that people can utilize the forest in terms of beekeeping is concerned.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. I once again wish we had so much more time, just because there's so much information and so many topics to address. I do want to mention that for folks that are watching that do want more information, we do have links to the apiculture platform of Kenya available on Frederick's bio, both on our website and YouTube and Facebook links. Thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with us today, Frederick.
Thank you very much too.
And as we are nearing the end of the afternoon, as you can see from the sun coming in the window at a very different angle than when I began, I want to thank both of our speakers, Frederick and Toby, for all of that amazing information that they shared with us. And as our final live session for today's event, I also want to express my gratitude to all of our speakers and panelists throughout the day. And thank you to everyone that's tuned in to watch. If you've missed any of our broadcasts, or if you want to watch anything again, we'll have all session recordings available at Sultry Arts Fall Festoon event website momentarily. Please also feel free to continue exploring the event website for a range of other activities that are all continuing in our celebration of the honeybee. Thank you all again, and take care.